Hey.
Greetings.
Hello, everyone.
According to the internet, we're live, folks.
It must be true.
It must be. The internet never lies.
So, hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. Today we have company. As you can see, our guest is Aiyana Goodfellow. Aiyana is a writer, liberationist, and delinquent. He stands for total liberation and interspecies rebellion. They run the Anti-Speciesist Arts Collective, host We Speak of Freedom podcast, and are the co-founder of NEUROMANCERS. Her newest creation, the Radical Companionship Project, is a pro-animal theory, anti-species study group, and mutual aid network. So, as you can guess, we have a lot to explore today.
Yes.
Thank you for doing this, Aiyana. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
To what extent are you a delinquent then, Aiyana?
It's a good question. Delinquent is a word I've started using recently because I've been learning more and thinking more about ageism. And delinquency, or the word delinquent, is or has historically been used to vilify marginalized students, basically, and marginalized children, particularly Black children and poor children, and just people that don't fit into what the system wants us to fit into. And I think that misbehavior and delinquency and rebellion are obviously what's going to help us create liberation. So I wanted to reclaim that and use that as a word of solidarity.
Absolutely. That's what we're about, isn't it? Cultural rebellion.
Yes.
So who have we got in the house then, Wendy?
Oh, who've we got? Well, I think there's been a little bit of cheating going on here. Amber Sky. So Amber was the first to join, but actually she said that she was cheating and she commented last night. But anyways, we've got Amber somewhere here, and we've got Michael, Vegmet Cobod, and we've got Bridget, and who's there? Oh, Ronnie. Ronnie Lee, Ronnie's here. We've got Lynn and Dave, BC, Bernie Brannick, and we've got Deb. Oh, we got Dave, and we've got a little Brian's bottom, of course. Thank you. Of course.
Always.
Yeah, just a little word. Lynn, hope you're doing okay. I know you've not been well lately, but hope you're on the mend and all that.
We're feeling better, Lynn.
Yeah.
Oh, and we've got Kieran just joined us as well. Hey, Kieran.
Hey.
And Philip. Oh, we've got people coming in. We might just spend the whole show doing hellos if people just keep coming in.
Happy Labour Day.
Happy Labour Day, Philip.
Hello, Brian's bottom. Okay. we never missed a chance to highlight Brian's bottom, do we? So
we don't actually. It's the star of the show.
Yeah. So Brian's bottom, Aiyana, Brian's bottom. So just in case you.
He's got quite a lovely other end as well, though, Aiyana. Quite a lovely little head as well.
Lovely little other end.
I
like that.
Other end.
Right, so down to business. What are we going to do today?
What we doing? So go ahead.
Should we go ahead and explore the Radical Companionship Project?
Indeed. Well, I shall bring that up on the screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we launched the Radical Companionship Project a week ago, last Monday. And as you can see, it's a pro-animal theory and anti-speciesist study group and a mutual aid network. And the point was to focus on animals colonized into pethood, which is a phrase that I coined and use to describe companion animals. I don't like the word pets, obviously, because it has speciesist connotations. And I also don't like the term companion animals because it's kind of like saying farm animals, I guess, as if specific species of animals only exist in their relation to the way that humans exploit them, basically, and as if humans are owed companionship from those animals. And I think that animals colonized into pethood kind of helps us frame our thinking, or helps me frame my thinking at least, into understanding how humans have been active in colonizing non-human animals, and non-humans are colonized individuals and communities. And that pethood is a social structure of domination and of subjugation. And truthfully, it doesn't actually just apply to humans and non-humans, it applies to intrahuman relationships as well, which is something that I talk about in the theory. And then the Anti-Speciesist study group part, we explore various texts, including the theory, ask questions, question our privilege. It's basically just a way to explore anti-speciesism through an anti-capitalist and consistent anti-oppression lens with other advocates and anti-speciesists. And then we created the Mutual Aid Network, because even though sanctuaries, animal sanctuaries, non-human animal sanctuaries, don't get the support that is necessary and needed, there are many humans out there who are caregivers and who look after non-human animals, but also need support. And so we wanted to create a space for that to exist and happen, and for us to be more connected through the Radical Companionship Project.
This is something that is often overlooked in the movement. Why do you think is that? Is it because people are not aware that even the animals that we share our homes with are not oppressed, or do they think that these individuals have it better than the other ones that live in, are bred in farms, for example?
Yeah, I think in terms of like the mainstream vegan movement, it's very obviously saviorist. And I think people like to focus on saving animals and saving masses of animals. So, you know, there's this like calculated thing, I think, where if you've been vegan for this amount of time, then you've supposedly saved this many animals. Or like statistics like X amount of animals are being killed every day for this industry. It's always used for shock factor in a savioristic way, in a paternalistic way. And I think part of the reason why we don't always focus on our relationships with animals colonized into pethood is because we have close and intimate relationships with them, because we can't just say they're nameless, faceless, mass individual. They're nameless, faceless masses. And because with animals colonized into pethood, we have to recognize them as individuals. And I do think there is this general focus as well, like with phrases like why love one and not the other. What people are failing to recognize through phrases like that is that no non-human is exempt from speciesism. But what they are recognizing through that phrase is that there are varying ways that speciesism presents. And I'd argue that being colonized into pethood means that you have a certain proximity to humanness, which I don't want to say is privilege, because I'm not a non-human. I can't really speak to the like privilege dynamics within speciesism in detail, but there definitely is a proximity to humanness. Yeah, I'll stop talking.
Oh, presumably the main advantage of being socially constructed as a pet is that you are then regarded as an individual, which is one of the major differences, isn't it, in terms of farmed animals, for example, where they're seen as units of production. So in that sense, that would be a kind of advantage, even though, see, the thing is, I've always said that I think sometimes we don't, or we fail to really kind of totally understand the fact that we're just using other animals as pets in the same way as we're using others as food. And so I've never quite liked that why love one and the other, because, well, that's what we do. I mean, we use some in one way and we use some in another.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I feel that because it kind of, that whole example of why love one and eat the other, it kind of assumes that the dog and human relationship is exemplary as well, and that we're kind of holding that up as a goal to achieve, and I think this really dismisses the reality of what dogs are actually experiencing as well. And it also, in terms of, say, from an animal rights point of view, it does focus on the treatment rather than the breeding and the captivity of what we do to so-called pets or other animals colonized into pethood. And it just send that message that love is the goal as well, when actually, because we're saying, love, why don't you love cows? Why don't you love pigs and sheep the same way that you love dogs? And actually, we wouldn't want that relationship with those other animals. If anything, we want to be stopping the breeding of those individuals, because that's not our right to do that. And I think it's also when people categorize by function, so as Roger was just saying there, and this message probably doesn't compute as well for some people, because people categorize by function. It's like, well, these other animals are for to be pets, and these animals we eat or we wear or we do whatever. So I think for some people, that message of why love this one, why love dogs, but eat cows, it's like for some people that it just makes sense that we do that, because that's how we've been socialized to see the function of those particular.
It's a functionalist attitude, certainly. Before we move away from this, Aiyana, you're pretty big on Instagram. I've never really. Well, there's a reference to it on the website, and then it goes to your Instagram account. Yeah, but I've never really got used to it. And Michael here is saying I don't use Instagram much. So, have you found it useful, Instagram?
Yeah, I think that many people use it as like a tool for their activism, which I recognize, especially like for the disabled community who may not have like access to other kinds of activism. But for me, I use it mostly as a learning and a sharing tool, I would say. I just share my thoughts, and I learn from other people and try and grow my mind and my thinking processes and the way that I see the world through it.
Yeah. I just thought I'd throw that in because it came up. This is on the pet issue. I know about your thing about language, that we did change in the movement from the 80s, start to talk about companion animals, and then a few people then started to talk about animal companions. So do you think that solves the issue a little bit better than saying? Well, obviously we're all very wary of saying pet, because that's and then companion animals got the problem of giving them a job. Whereas animal companion seems to possibly resolve at least substantial amounts of that.
Yeah, I think I'd agree there. I think, because you're kind of just stating your relationship, I guess, with the non-human person. So yeah, I agree.
Just coming back to Dave's. This is the one. Is being a pet the more preferable position than what the other victims experience? And I guess that again focuses on more of the treatment side of things. Like, so it's focusing on the quality of the relationship, not the type of relationship. And I guess the type of relationship is still one that's in captivity, whether they are seen as pets or whether they are seen as farmed. I hate all these terms, by the way. I'm just saying what they're known as. But if you think of how, even if we just take dogs as an example, we claim to be, and this is always put out there by the movement, we claim to be a nation of dog lovers. We hear this a lot, and yet we test on them. There's a massive campaign going on at the moment with Camp Beagle and highlighting how we're testing on dogs. We force them to race. We force them to fight. We limit their behaviors. Even the ones who are loved and living in homes, we're still limiting their behaviors drastically. I mean, I went for a walk with a dog yesterday, and just the very nuanced things that I experienced on that walk, with how the other people walking with dogs were talking to them, the kind of things they were saying, the kind of behavior, yanking them back, not allowing them to sniff, things like this. We're very limiting on their behaviors, so we control and dominate them so much, and we force them into our world, and we sexually exploit them as well to breed. to bring more of them into the world, and often that will be for a certain look, a certain size, shape, color, temperament, and all these things. So we have to recognize that this is not a liberated relationship, even though sometimes the treatment side might be a little bit better than, you know, other situations. The relationship is still one of oppressor and it's still captivity, I guess, in that way. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Aiyana.
There's no preferable experience of speciesism. It's all speciesism, and so it's all unacceptable.
Going back to that thing about the lovers thing, dog lovers and animal lovers and everything, and it's interesting because, I mean, I think you'll be interested in this, Wendy, is the fact that there was a kind of a bit of a push to move away from this kind of animal lover type talk, but maybe that from an eco-feminist point of view would be criticized in the sense that it was part and parcel of, that's because we're very rational. You know, the idea of animal rights is a very rational idea, and so, you know, there was a famous speech in the States where he said, you know, don't call me an animal lover, I'm not, you know, and so it's about respect instead. And so I've been quite surprised that it's kind of come back quite strong in the movement, that phraseology, whereas it kind of faded away for a while, at least. It was always used in the press. You used to get ridiculous headlines like "Animal Lovers Storm Laboratory," which doesn't seem to fit, does it? Animal Lovers Storm.
You gotta love the mainstream media. Gotta love them.
You do. Yeah, what Debbie says here, I think, is really good, because one thing I really dislike is there's a thing in the movement where we infantilize other animals, and we always say, oh, this little baby, this little girl, and I remember very clearly about 3 years ago there was someone needed adoption, and this dog was described as a baby boy, and I think he was about 15 years old. And so it was really weird the way that we seem to want to create permanent children out of other animals, which I think is another kind of weird thing that goes on.
Yeah, I kind of talk about that. Like, it's really interesting you brought that up, because I kind of talk about that in the book. There's a section called Respect and Relationships, where I talk about non-human animals who and their kind of role within the family unit, basically. And yeah, the point about infantilization is really interesting, because I think that both the way that we treat children and the way that we treat animals colonized into pethood is very, very similar, because we cutify them. We just see them as cute objects to own, to live vicariously through, to dress up, to point at, rather than as full individuals with autonomy and who are worthy of respect. And I think part of that behavior is that behavior of, oh, he's a little boy, in terms of referring to non-human animals, is that cutification. It's trying to make them cute, make them appealing to us, so that we choose them as pets, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I'd never thought of that connection before. That you're the first person who I've heard speak about that, actually, Aiyana. That kind of connection between how we view and our attitudes towards human children and how we infantilize other animals. Yeah, that's really sparked things going in my mind. And I'm just thinking of myself when I was a child, that I actually hated being a child with a passion, really, really hated it. And I hated how adults treated me and how they talked to me. And I felt like I was this independent being, this individual with so much to say and do, but yet felt completely suppressed and oppressed and limited. And you just really sparked a lot of things in my mind there. So yeah.
Do you know one of the things that I used to hate when I was a kid, and this was way before I kind of went vegan or anything like that, is I used to hate it when people made dogs in particular beg for food. I used to hate that. And there was always something about it that I didn't like, and I don't suppose I could have really articulated the reason. But there was just something about that I thought, this is not right. And I was actually quite shocked recently because there's a fairly new activist film out, and in the film, one of the activists gets a dog to beg for food, and I thought, this is really odd thing to do, for an animal activist to do it.
I think young people can probably relate a lot to the position of animals colonized into pethood, because in a way, I think parents can create a similar kind of dynamic, kind of intrahuman pethood with their own children. Yeah. Oh, and I also wanted to say, I actually use this word as well, but I'm trying not to use the word infantilize, because I think that it makes the way that we treat children as inferior, as cute, kind of the default, because we use it for all sorts of things to describe the way that like women are treated under patriarchy, and for example, many other things. But I'm trying not to use that word because I think it uses the way that we treat human children disrespectfully as a default when it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Is it not more that you would, without actually saying anything about children, you're actually just critiquing treating an adult like
a child. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but you're not really saying. Well, I suppose I see what you mean.
It's like,
but then you're saying that should be that should be the way we just only treat children. It's okay to treat children like that. That's what I understand. That's what you're saying, Aiyana.
It's like, I don't know if you've read The Sexual Politics of Meat. I'm still working my way through it, but Carol J. Adams talks about absent referent and using, I think she's talking about using non-humans as absent reference. So when we say they treated like that woman like a piece of meat, we are kind of acknowledging the speciesism there without really bringing it into the conversation. So when we say infantilization, we're kind of acknowledging the ageism there, but we're not really bringing it into the conversation. Both children and animals in those examples are absent reference.
What about those cases that there is really a common denominator between the way we treat children and other animals when we violate consent, for example? And this is something that torments me all the time. I used to live with a cat. She passed away recently. And that thing tormented me all the time we've been together, because every time I took her to the doctor, for example, I had to violate consent, because she obviously, she made really clear that she didn't want to go there. And I was torn. I felt that I had to take her to the doctor. She was in pain, for example, or she was in danger. And so I did the same thing we do with very young kids. We just take them there. I mean, kicking and screaming, we take them there. And in that case, it's like adult animals. They are not babies. So on a practical level, how can we negotiate that?
I think that's one of the hardest points, and I explore it in my writing a little bit, not a little bit, quite a bit, in the section consent and communication, because obviously consent and communication are essential to any kind of relationship, especially relationships with non-human animals where we don't speak the same language. And truthfully, honestly, I don't yet have a solution, because I've spoken to people who have way more experience than me in looking after animals, and operations like hysterectomies, if that's the right word, hysterectomies on non-human animals is a way that, supposedly under a speciesist society helps them. But we can't escape the fact that it is speciesist. And I think that is almost a whole conversation, a whole theory, a whole book in itself. And I think it's very important that we sit with it, because we're not just going to be able to solve speciesism like that. We have violated non-human animals to the point where we are disrespecting their consent on a daily basis, and we almost have to in order to keep them safe. And that's how speciesism keeps us in this cycle, in this loop. And that's why it is so clearly institutional, not just an interpersonal thing. And I don't think it's a question that I haven't answered to yet, but it's one that I still sit with and I still consider, and I still want to find a way around. But at the same time, you know, the reason why speciesism has been so present for so long is because it's difficult to find a way around it. But I truthfully think it could be a whole conversation with itself.
And I wonder, Aiyana, what you think about another situation that I often deal with, as well as the one you've just been talking about with not having consent for medical treatment and things like this. But also there's when you're caring for other animals in your home, for example, the cat people like Brian, who love to go out into the garden, so that they're already restricted. So I feel like there's that sense of restricting their own natural behaviors in terms of, you know, if they were to have their way, they'd be off wandering out in the streets and maybe everywhere. So they have like a garden that's they just stay in the garden kind of thing. But there will be times when, for example, at night, they go out at night and there'll be insects flying around and they love to chase the insects and catch moths. Or during spring, you know, there'll be birds nesting. So I'll be keeping the cat people inside. And then there's times where, you know, they might bring in another little individual, like a frog person or a mouse. And then it's a matter of trying to save the individual. And often they've usually been okay. This is not like a real regular thing, but there's that sense of, right, if you have your autonomy and your freedom, you're then restricting or violating the freedom of the free living animals that are out in the garden. It's that sense of that conflict between the two worlds coming together and navigating that all the time on a daily basis. And I just wonder, because I know you have the 4 roots in your project, and I wonder if, I don't know if you would like to guide us through those, and I wonder if those would maybe inform some of these situations and how we navigate them at all. I don't know if that would help.
Yeah, I could definitely explain the roots to you, and I'll see if I can try and answer the question in that as well. So the first root is affirming animals. Affirming animals explains how we need to respect animality within ourselves as humans, and not define humanness by technologicalness, by intellectualness, by white supremacy, basically. And then obviously also respect non-human animals and their realities, and not set human as the default and judge non-humans against non-humans. So not say that they're just like us as an argument for their rights or liberation, because they're not just like us, and that's okay, and they still deserve rights and liberation. Respect and relationships, as I kind of mentioned, is about non-humans placed within the patriarchal nuclear family unit, and particularly how that relates to young people and children within the family unit. Consent and communication kind of gives some very simple tips, I guess, and advice, very basic advice, on how we can communicate with non-human animals, like physically, and the importance of it, and the fact that we also need to acknowledge non-human mental health as well as physical health when it comes to caregiving. And then animal futurism is the concept of basically just investing in animal futures, and that includes all animals, human and non-human, through any means, through taking action, through any kind of activism, through theorizing, and importantly through artistic expression, through using our imagination, and for exploring all of the possibilities of a future where we can embrace our multi-species world and care about everybody who exists. I didn't answer your question there, did I?
No, that's brilliant. I was just taking in everything you were saying, and letting that kind of process through. But I'm wondering, so with that situation that I just explained with the free living animals and the the colonized into pethood animals, how do you see, how could your sort of theory inform how we navigate some of those situations? Do you have any suggestions on that?
Well, I guess it's important to affirm and respect the animality of everybody involved. That includes the animals that we've colonized into pethood, the animals who are free living, and the humans. We have created and destroyed our local ecosystems in a way that means that, for example, interactions between cats and mice can become detrimental to the population of mice or the population of a certain species of insect. I'm not an ecologist, and I don't live in every place in the world, so I can't speak to the individual ecosystem and nature of each place in the world. But there is something that I talk about in the third chapter of the book, Multispecies Sanctuary, which was also inspired by conversations with Justin, who is the co-founder, I believe, maybe, of the Micro Sanctuary Resource Center. Got terrible memory, sorry.
Oh, well done.
So Multispecies Sanctuary is basically about looking at individual neighborhoods and communities and seeing that as sanctuary. So engaging in care with the animals that we've colonized into pethood, with the free living animals, with the humans around us, and trying to create autonomous caring communities. And this is already in practice. Like everything that I talk about in the theory is already in practice in some way, right? So, like, for example, hunt sabs are engaging in a practice of multi-species sanctuary because they're taking care of the environment, they're protecting non-human animals, and fostering an environment where we can all thrive, I guess. I can't say that I have a set and specific and clear answer because everyone is different, and I don't want to. I don't want to pretend like it's easy, and I don't want to pretend that I have all the answers. But I think that the practice of multi-species sanctuary, as well as affirming animality and engaging in animal futurism, can definitely all contribute to creating communities where there is more balance in the kind of situations that you described.
I suppose for me, the way I try to navigate everything is very, in a very contextual way, is try to take each situation and think and kind of assess it almost day by day. So, okay, it's not like I have a blanket rule of, right, they never go out then, or they always go out then, or we're always going to do this. I try and kind of take into account the situation on that day. What's the situation? For example, if it is spring and I know that I can hear lots of birds, and I this year I had I think there was a nest of wrens nesting in one of my one of the local trees close to my garden, and I just knew that they were really close, and I could hear them, and I could see the parents flitting in and out to the nest, feeding the babies. And so it was like, right, for this, however long it takes, I'm afraid the cat people, you're just going to have to stay inside, because there's no way that we want to put the wrens at risk. And I know that it seems really awful, but at the moment you've got just the basics of what you need, and the wrens are really trying to survive out there. So I guess I take it in context like that. And then there'll be other times where it feels like, okay, the garden seems clear today, let's let them out, and then maybe just try and keep an eye on what they're up to, and if there seems to be any shenanigans going on, it's like bring them back in again. So so it's difficult, I guess it's difficult. No, sorry, do go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say it's difficult because we also want to do it in a way where we're not playing God. We're not reinforcing human supremacy. basically. Because there is a ridiculous narrative among some people that carnivore non-humans should be, culled or murdered en masse because they hunt prey animals. And so I think there is definitely a danger of humans being humans and completely misinterpreting the intention of organizing communities in a way that is more sustainable and careful, and instead just reinforcing the supremacy.
It's very difficult.
Would you say that also in this interspecies communities is important for us not to encourage other animals getting dependent on us? I'm having a very specific situation in my mind, because here we have like thousands of I don't like the word stray, but I don't know what other word to use. Stray cats and dogs. So trying to take care of this community, especially because now they have to live in our cities, and that's a situation we imposed on them. And it's a situation that makes their life different. One can decide to try and assist in a way by putting out, I don't know, food or water during the really hot summer here, because they're really in need of water. And some of these individuals choose to interact. I mean, some don't. They just want the food. They're okay with the food and the water. But in my experience, many want to interact. And sometimes I worry, because it's always an honor when another animal wants to interact with you and they start this interaction. But often I'm thinking, at what point they're becoming too dependent on my presence, like on my daily presence. And I assume we're not other than birds and mice. In the cities, they're not, for example, squirrels or foxes like in London. So it's like domesticated animals and us mostly.
Well, I guess it's important to create then, I guess, independent spaces for them and make sure that they have safe spaces to rest and to live, basically, that aren't necessarily like in human homes. I think part of encouraging radical companionship is encouraging relationships and interspecies relationships. But I agree there has to be a balance about making sure that they're not reliant. And I think there's a way that there's a way that we can create space for them, specifically for them, specifically tailored to them, and also know that they are welcome within human communities as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
it does. I think the difficulty is go ahead, Wendy. I just want to say the greatest challenge is to acknowledge the speciesism within us, and that sometimes in our actions there is speciesism that we are not aware of, and obviously interspecies relations can solve that if we approach them in a critical way. I mean, if we see our behavior in a critical way.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, it seems like whatever we're doing, we're kind of trying to undo everything we've already done. Do you know what I mean? It's like we're kind of trying to unwind all the absolute mayhem we've caused in the world. And it's just so difficult, isn't it? It's just such a tangled web.
Yeah. And I think one of the most difficult things about it is because of our communication barriers with non-humans, we can't directly ask them. We can't take their lead as effectively, you know, as we can take the lead of marginalized humans as privileged people. So yeah, it's very tricky to navigate.
Yeah, definitely. Roger, I'm wondering, should we it's quite interesting, the article we were looking at earlier, because while we're on the subject of the so-called pets and a change in recent law in the UK. I don't know if have you got that? So I don't know if Aiyana, did you see?
I can get it.
Ah, brilliant. Did you see they're going to bring in a new offence which will be for abducting pets, and it's basically extending the sentencing to up to 7 years, because now they're starting to say that whereas before, like, because other animals are considered property, so there's been this charge or this offence of stealing pets, but now they're saying that because they've been listening to, you know, and I'm using this language, this is not my language, but pet owners and you know, they're listening to vets and listening to different people, they're now starting to realize that actually these animals are not just like property, they're more than that. So they're now extending they're creating a new offence so that it will be considered abduction. But what's ironic about this is the way this has come about is because during the COVID and lockdown and all of this, a lot more people have been going out buying other animals, and the prices have really increased for dogs and cats in particular. And so now, therefore, people are starting to realize they can really profit from this. So they're now, there's been a lot more abduction of these, animal companions because it's more profitable for people. So the irony of that is they're being bred to be bought to be sold as property, and therefore that's creating this abduction. And now they're saying, well, actually, we should not consider them property in this way because it's very traumatizing for the animal as well. So it's just quite mind-boggling, really, but it's quite an interesting one.
No, I hadn't heard of this before. So yeah, this is very interesting. But I am an abolitionist of prisons and police and carceral systems. So my heart's reaction is: do we want animals to be recognized under law, or do we want laws in the government and the state, etc., to be abolished? And I think that while it's interesting that they are kind of acknowledging dogs, is it dogs in particular?
I think they're saying pets, but I think it'll probably be mostly dogs, I imagine, and perhaps cats.
Yeah, they do pick out dogs and cats here.
Yeah. I wouldn't imagine it would be like they would be including guinea pigs or hamsters, for example, based on the hierarchy of how we view non-human animals. Yeah.
Well, I suppose capitalism would include anyone who became valuable enough, I suppose. But I mean, one thing this thing that I've highlighted here, I think you can see that on your screen, is the thing that we picked out earlier on, in the sense that ministers were thought to be considering incorporating the new offence of pet theft into the existing Theft Act, but rejected the idea after concluding that animals shouldn't be valued in the same way as property, and that the existing offence was inadequate for prosecuting pet thieves. And we just thought, isn't this kind of typical of what speciesism does, especially when you try to put something through a speciesist legislation system, because it just gets into a complete confused mess. I mean, they're saying, oh, well, we've got to do something here because the animals shouldn't be valued in the same way as property. But that's exactly what we do all the time.
Yeah, they are in every other area.
Yeah.
I think it's got a lot to do with proximity again, and the different like kind of jobs or roles that we assign or onto various animals. like, for example, farmed animals will always be seen as property. You know, if you know, the law started to acknowledge the personhood of farmed animals, then I can't imagine that happening. But because, you know, dogs and cats have a certain proximity to humans because they've been colonized into pethood. Specifically, pethood allows them kind of allows them a bit of individuality, and we can see it being recognized here. But this kind of just feels like a liberal response to speciesism rather than a more radical or anarchist or whatever one. If that makes sense. I'm not saying that they are anti-speciesist, but it feels like nothing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you can imagine even if dogs and cats suddenly had this elevated status, and someone here commented, you too, says that it was a missed opportunity for the vegan movement to have lobbied for voluntary personhood to domesticated animals. I think even if that happened and we had this suddenly elevated privileged status of non-property and personhood for dogs and cats, I think in a way this would only in a way reinforce speciesism. It doesn't dismantle it, does it? Because we're still putting these species up on this in this hierarchy at the expense of everyone else. Like you said, you can't imagine giving personhood to the pigs that are being bred for people to consume, because that wouldn't be in human interest. So therefore, we're still reinforcing these levels and the hierarchy, even with that status elevation, if we don't dismantle the whole system of human supremacy and speciesism.
It's also about how, like, personhood is defined. Personhood is defined by human, and therefore we're not affirming animals in doing, you know, what we're talking about or what they have done, because we're setting human personhood as the default. Sorry, I completely forgot what I was going to say. That was really ridiculous, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, definitely.
It is an interesting point from Deb, because isn't it true that animals become individual property when you kill them? You know, free living beings are seen as property of the state, but when a hunter goes and kills one of them, then the ownership, the property status, is transferred to the person who did the killing, which is almost like a bizarre thing, but that's always been the case as far as I know.
Yeah. There's no way of escaping the ownership.
I wanted to go back to the consent thing, Aiyana, in the sense that we're forced to interpret consent, though, aren't we? Because I mean, there's no other way because of that communication gap, right? And of course, you know, I know a lot of pet owners will say, "Oh, you know, my Tommy speaks to me," and all this kind of stuff. But of course, you know, we kind of, in a sense, know that that's not really true in the sense that we're talking about communication and, you know, asking, you know, trying to gain, you know, even with things like preferences, we have to just interpret behavior, don't we? We all become animal behaviorists and try and interpret that.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we ought to really bear in mind as well, is acknowledge that as humans, we feel like we understand everything, or that we have the potential to understand everything about other animals, when actually we don't. We can never be them. And therefore, we're never going to fully understand them as we think we might. We always feel like, oh yeah, we know what they're thinking. If we study them enough, we'll know exactly how they think and feel and how they behave and what that means. But actually, that's just been really kind of arrogant, really, and assuming that we have that level of capacity to know them, because often I struggle to know myself, to be honest, on a daily basis. So how I can you know, say that I will know what they're thinking and feeling, and also to acknowledge that we don't always know what's best. We think that we always know what's best, and we don't know everything. We don't know what's best, and we don't always fully understand how they experience the world. And I think it's really important that we always have that in our minds as well, and have a little bit of humility about us.
Definitely.
Well, humans are not good at that, though, are they?
Oh, no.
Humility. I'm just going to bring up part of the website that intrigued me, actually, because obviously you were saying it's only been up there for a short time, Aiyana, so it's kind of a work in progress, obviously, yeah? Yeah. So this bit here, when you're talking about the money aspect, I was struck because you I think there's money for SAB equipment again. So is the hunt saboteur something that really is attractive to you as an idea?
Yeah, I mean, they work to protect, like literally protect the lives of non-human animals. And whilst the Radical Companionship Project mostly focuses on the non-humans themselves, we and I acknowledge that many of the non-human animals that we get the privilege to care for wouldn't be safe without people who took action to protect them. And I think that part of animal futurism is investing in people who, in ourselves who take action, and also in others within our community who take action to protect and support the lives of non-human animals. And obviously this isn't coming from like a saviorist perspective or how it's mainly done in the mainstream vegan movement. The mutual aid side of Radical Companionship is based in solidarity, and that solidarity must include all animals, non-human and human.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned mainstream veganism, because you're very critical of that. And in fact, one of the things, I mean, like if you think about, Ronnie in the chat and myself, we would have come into the movement through the hunt sabs, but but sabbing has almost been forgotten. You don't see the influencers talking about sabbing. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen any of the influencers going sabbing, and it's a little bit like vivisection. It was kind of suddenly put on the back burner. It's really interesting the way that the issues have flipped over, because veganism could have been seen as an overarching position from which to talk about all these things, but it didn't seem to pan out that way. So presumably this is why you prefer anti-speciesism as an idea rather than veganism as a concept or a philosophy?
I mean, I am vegan, but personally I'm over it. Like, I'm done with it. I think it's been co-opted too much to reclaim, like having to explain the specific veganism that works in a truthfully anti-speciesist, in an anti-capitalist way. It just doesn't work anymore for me. So yeah, I prefer anti-speciesist and pro-animality.
Do you think it's worth, rather than, as it were, giving it over to the moderate mainstream, would it be worth, I mean, this is my gig really, but would it be worth fighting for the heart of veganism? For example, I mean, one of my favorite quotes ever is from 1945 by Donald Watson. And he says, the object of the vegan society is to oppose the exploitation of sentient beings, whether it's profitable to do so or not. And I've always read that last bit as being, at least you could read it as an anti-kind of capitalist type sentiment at the very least. And some of the pioneers said very radical things, in the sense that the people who started our movement were kind of more radical than a lot of people in the movement now. Certainly the ones who are running, say, the Vegan Society. And so rather than kind of just hand it over and say, okay, you now make of it what you want, I tend to think, well, hang on a second, perhaps we should fight for its values, veganism's values, the philosophy of veganism.
No, I do agree. And I think that's an important point that I hadn't really sat down and considered enough. I think it's only right and respectful to the foundations of and the history of the animal liberationist movement to reclaim veganism and use it respectfully, talk about it respectfully in a way that's both respectful to the history of it, but also to the non-human animals themselves. So I do agree with you there, yeah.
Well, I mean, on the other side of it, I mean, I do understand why people would abandon it in a sense as well, because it's got so mainstream and it's been moderated and all the rest of it. But then again, that is what happens to social movements anyway. It's just that it seems a very kind of passive thing to do. Because I know a lot of activists have moved away from. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't actually self-identify as vegans anymore, and that seems to be a bit of a trend in the last couple of years. And I kind of understand it, but I regret it as well.
Well, I think I personally will always be and identify with and as vegan. I think my main point in saying that I was kind of over it was that in discussions with people who are not vegan or aware of anti-speciesism, rather than fronting with veganism when they already have a specific idea of veganism in their mind, which is informed by white veganism and mainstream veganism and problematic version of it. I come from a place of anti-speciesism. I come from a place of anti or decolonialism, because I think people are just, in my experience, more receptive to that than something that they've already created an idea about in their minds. But yeah, I definitely will always be a vegan and always identify as vegan.
Yeah, because
it's interesting because.
Sorry,
Roger. No, I was only bringing up because it's just continuing this conversation. I think Dave said at 6:54, vegan for me is just a way of saying no animal products. I like animal rights, and I think I do hear this a lot as well. And I think it's almost because veganism has almost had that. It's been reduced in so many different ways that even within the movement, people see veganism as that, just about the products, when actually, again, originally, as we know, and a lot of what I've learned about the pioneers and the origins of veganism is through Roger's work, actually. And there's some really good articles that Roger's written about this and how the origins of veganism was very much an overarching philosophy of animal liberation, really, not just about products, although products became the practical things that we can do. I suppose that's what it becomes about, isn't it? What can we actually do? What do we need to change or whatever? But I think philosophically it is about animal rights and animal liberation, but it's been reduced so much that people tend not to associate it with that anymore. They just think about the consumption or boycotting rather than the actual philosophy of what it really means. And it's kind of sad in a way, because it's kind of tainted. It's, for some people, it's really tainted, like as it seems it is a little bit for you as well, Aiyana.
Yeah.
Of course,
do you think that?
Argue. Sorry.
Go ahead, Roger. No.
No, I just argue that veganism is even more than that, in the sense that, I mean, Watson claimed that vegan movement could save humanity, and that really was what founded the vegan movement. Was a few people came together and tried to work out why humanity has become so violent, and they thought veganism was the answer to it. And they thought through changing our relationships with other animals, we would change the relationship with each other and also the planet. So it was a really kind of big idea, and I'm not quite sure that big idea is appreciated much anymore in the movement.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think that very important things are lost in the way. I mean, when trying to advocate for veganism, for example, without stressing individuality or allyship or agency or resistance, and the other as animal resistance. I mean, what's mainstream veganism right now, in my opinion, misses all these things. They're never mentioned, and I don't know if they're ever, but thought that we cannot really ever have liberation when we don't stress the importance of allyship, and then the other animals' agency, and the fact that they are not like passive beings waiting for us to go and save them. In my mind, there are like two basic things. One is not to practically exploit them or support their exploitation, but it's also to shed light to their agency and resistance. I feel that what's is missing from mainstream veganism. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, just digesting really.
Yeah.
Yeah, Philip says regrettable. You see, the thing is, I go back to Guy Francione. He stopped calling himself animal rights and came up with the abolitionist idea because he said that animal rights as an idea has been corrupted by welfarism. But the point is, because he also then said that he reckons within a few more years, the idea of abolitionism would be meaningless because a lot of people who he would regard as not abolitionists are now using that phrase too. But that's the problem, though, isn't it? I mean, you can't just keep inventing ideas and then giving them away because other people come along and, reduce them or slim them down or change it or redefine it. There's got to be a time when you stand your ground and say, well, actually, this is what it means, and it's a great idea. What's
Can we go back to the site for a bit? I have a question, even if we don't have the site in front of us. So how does this work? People that have the capacity to offer, and people that are taking care of other animals, and at some point they're in some kind of need, they can request something. How does this practically?
You want me to put you want to put that back on again? Yeah. Okay. No worries.
Oh yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, and the bottom part of this. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, effectively, you must be trying to create a fund. Are you then, Aiyana? Yeah.
Not exactly. So it's basically a channel that you can subscribe to through the app Telegram. Is a messaging app, and there's also the ability to have channels. So you just click the link and then you can join, and there is another link to send in your requests and offers. So somebody could request like a bag of canary food and say, I'm in this general location, if anybody wants it, they can come and get it. But then somebody might have a £1,000 vet bill that they need help with. They can send in their request, share it on the group, and as many people who can help, who see it, will hopefully contribute to their little GoFundMe situation. So it's not necessarily like a fund that the Radical Companionship Project will control. We're trying to foster a community and a network of people.
Oh, you're just like putting people together to have a
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just kind of matching people, facilitating.
Yeah. Do you help impoverished activists in Panama, for example?
Springing that on me.
Roger likes to get his little spoon in there, don't you, Roger? Stir things up a little bit.
Well, maybe that will be one of the next projects.
Well, there's a great need, obviously. So yeah.
So how was the project received? Is one question, and the other one is it's not on social media, is it?
Sorry, what was the first part of your sentence? I didn't quite hear.
This project is not on social media.
No.
There is not no. So how people get to know about it and.
Yeah. So we chose to be off social media because we didn't want to engage in any kind of performative activism. We wanted it to be based in community and community action, even though for now that is online based. And the best way to learn about the project is just go to the website, radicalcompanionship.com, and it's got all the relevant links and information there. Yeah.
Oh, great. And
So
also,
the
it happened recently. So what was how it's going until now?
Yeah, it's been really good. Like the study group Radcom has been really cool. We've had some really interesting conversations, and hearing everybody's thoughts about how they define speciesism and how that's how their definition is affected by their human privilege was the first question that we kind of discussed. And yeah, it's just so far been really interesting to hear everybody's answers. The group is growing, the channel is growing, and I'm really excited to see what future conversations that we have, the disagreements that we have, because I love disagreements and debates, and I love learning and I love growing my personal practice and theories and ideas and way of seeing the world. So yeah, it's going very well. Thank you. Yeah.
And you've got a book in the making. You mentioned your book a couple of times, Aiyana.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So there is no specific date as to when it's coming. It will be in the future in a format, possibly printed, maybe online. We'll see. Fingers crossed printed, because that'd be really exciting. But I am still working through and editing because I'm a perfectionist. But yes, it will be here soon, and it just kind of explains the ideas behind the Radical Companionship Project, my radical companionship theory, the ideas of pethood, how they relate to relationships with non-human animals, and also how they relate to relationships with human animals, which we didn't really get a moment to discuss here, but I think that's a really interesting part of it as well. And then just kind of wider concepts and how they can help us move towards interspecies rebellion and interspecies liberation.
You could say a little now, if you want to, about what you just said there, what you said we didn't get time to talk about.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, the basic idea of pethood is that it's about being part of a marginalized group, pretty much, and then having a proximity to the dominant or privileged figure. So within anti-Black racism, for example, light-skinned or lighter-skinned Black people have a proximity to whiteness, and therefore in many different ways could be seen as the pets of white people, especially if we look historically, if we take the very commonly used example of the transatlantic slave trade in the US. When talking about colorism, people often use this about how people enslaved to do housework were often lighter skinned because they were more palatable, and then darker skinned Black people would be made to work on the field. So they had a literal proximity to white people and whiteness, and there was a divide between the darker skinned people and the lighter skinned people. Similarly, pethood exists in relationships between specifically men and women. White women have a proximity to white manhood, whereas non-white people don't have the proximity because of the way that colonialism and gender interact. I'm not sure if you're aware, but gender diversity existed all around the world, but has been erased significantly because of Western European colonialism in Black and brown countries and in continents like Africa and Asia. And I'm trying to think of examples off the top of my head, but yeah, so those are a couple of examples of how pethood is emulated in human to human relationships, if that makes sense. But basically it's about a dominant figure owning somebody that they see as inferior.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
having full ownership of them. Like, for example, historically white men have had ownership over white women, have had control of like finances and their lives and stuff. So it's very intriguing to me the way that it's used in both intrahuman and extrahuman relationships.
It's very interesting.
Really
I'm looking
interesting.
forward to reading the book.
I was just going to say the same thing. It's really, really catching my interest. A lot of the kind of parallels that you've drawn today, I'm really, really interested. I just wonder, this really intrigues me, actually. Race Lever talks about being vegan and speciesist. And I think, Race, you might have said something last week about, because we talk about often dismantling hierarchies and things, and Race says that they're fine with hierarchy as long it doesn't necessarily mean that if we see someone as inferior, that they are there to be exploited or enslaved, etc. So
what time are you on there, Wendy?
7:10.
Oh, 7:10.
So Race earlier said something. I think they said I'm speciesist. Yes. Although my form of speciesist doesn't move towards animal exploitation, I can think something is superior without needing to think the inferior needs to be exploited or enslaved. So that's really interesting, because we often talk about how we need to dismantle hierarchy and get rid of this whole concept of being superior and inferior. And obviously Race is challenging that and saying we can have hierarchy, but we don't necessarily need to exploit or kill or whatever the inferior. And I think it might have been Race who was saying, I would still save you as a human over a puppy. I think that might have been something they said earlier. So I just find this really interesting, and I just wonder what your take might be on this, Aiyana, or anyone actually.
Yeah, I'm not sure I quite understand what this person is saying, to be fair. So I might let somebody get their answer while I try and work it out. Or if somebody can maybe explain it for me. I'm just not sure what they mean.
I think from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Race, you might want to elaborate, if that we can still have hierarchies and have people, or, you know, whether they're human or non-human, in superior and inferior status, without actually exploiting the people who are inferior in that hierarchy. But I don't know how that works then as is that actually then still a hierarchy? I don't know. Or is it just, because I guess wherever you're putting someone as more valuable than someone else, does that not leave that less valued party vulnerable to being exploited? I don't know how that plays out. It's interesting though.
Well,
It's making my brain.
Superior doesn't necessarily mean more valued either, does it? Though, I mean, we're into kind of Reagan's territory of human exceptionalism. So we could say in certain ways, human beings are exceptional beings. We have certain capacities which we assume other animals either don't have or they have to a lesser degree. Okay, and so, but that doesn't necessarily mean then that we're more valuable. It just means that we're different.
Yeah.
I personally think that, if we are superior and inferior in the sense that we are attributing different moral values, it's still an unjust world, and who is seen as inferior is not free.
And who decides anyway? Because surely the people at the top of the hierarchy are usually the ones who are deciding that they're conveniently at the top of that hierarchy. For me, that seems to... Because I think superior and inferior by their very nature, are they not higher and lower?
Yeah.
Rather than just saying someone has an exceptional quality or skill or whatever, because every individual would have something exceptional about them. Like, as humans, we can't echolocate. Well, I definitely can't. If any of you can over here, I really am interested in saying that. But we all have something exceptional. That doesn't make us superior. That just, like you said, makes us different. But does not the very word superior and inferior mean that kind of leveling? I don't know. Sorry, Aiyana, you keep trying to.
No, it's all right.
Jump in.
I think that superior and inferior do seem like hierarchical terms, but as far as I've interpreted, the way that they've described it, like they would save a human over a dog, is that just more to do with how, like, personally, how much they mean to you as an individual, or are you making that decision based on their species? Because if you're making it based on their species only, then I mean, I think that has an element of speciesism, but I would, prefer to save my mum over some stranger in the street because, I care about my mum more. Like, doesn't mean I see the stranger as inferior. It just means I'm more emotionally invested in my family, I guess. Unless that's what they were trying to say, or maybe I've interpreted it really wrong and differently.
I think because they've just clarified, basically the lowest on my hierarchy list still holds enough value for me to not want to harm or kill unnecessarily or exploit if there's no true need. So I guess it's still seeing some as less than, but still not killing them. And I suppose unless the situation arose, maybe that would be the thing, wouldn't it? I suppose if different situations arise, then you start having to make those decisions of like, and I suppose we all do in some ways, like, how do I make this decision based on what? Based on what value system do I make my decisions?
Getting into
very philosophical.
There's a challenge for you, Wendy.
Brian the cat or a fly? Well, Brian's my family, so that's. I guess that goes back to what you were saying just there, Aiyana, that you would choose. Yeah, but then would I choose Brian the cat over my distant third cousin, who's a human? Do you know what I mean? That's that's getting into that territory, isn't it? It's the relationship that you have with them as well.
Yeah.
I've saved a lot of flies from Brian's clutches as well. Let me tell you, the little jet pilots in this house have to get them out because he's.
Well, that's thwarting Brian's intentions and aspirations, then, isn't it?
I know. I have to.
He's a terrible human.
Brian's not happy with me when I do that, but
it's getting like the moral maze now. This.
Yeah. It's mind-boggling, isn't it, when you get into these philosophical questions?
Yeah. Definitely.
Hierarchy is a rating process, doesn't it? Yeah, it's I mean, it's difficult to do as soon as you start thinking in hierarchical terms, then it kind of sets off alarm bells, though, doesn't it? Surely. So that's one of the problems with it, because the more that you don't think that way, presumably the better things would be. It's more a question of whether you're just forced to. It's that old thing about being forced to be utilitarian against your will. I mean, going back to animal companions, I mean, we don't cheerfully do it, but I mean, through their millions, we interfere with their reproduction capacities by taking them down to the vet, don't we? Which is on the face of it a rights violation.
Yeah.
But we justify that on utilitarian grounds. So we're kind of forced into it. As well as another kind of quite interesting thing that's happening on Aiyana. I'm doing a TikTok experiment at the moment, so it's really interesting interacting with people on TikTok, as you can well imagine, probably. But one of the things that they're all talking about is kind of hierarchies and crop deaths, and they're trying to. Well, effectively, they keep coming up with problems that vegans have not created, but expect vegans to have a solution to them. So the usual thing about, well, if we didn't eat them, they'd overpopulate and this kind of stuff. And all the kind of things that non-vegans say to vegans. It's almost like, we've completely screwed the world. What are you vegans going to do about it? It's almost like really kind of weird in that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 It is weird. I was just thinking, actually, just thinking about this whole humans at the top kind of thing. And it's funny because when people are speciesist or in favor of the hierarchy, humans are usually at the top, and then you would have like the insect world and other individuals like this quite low at the bottom. But actually, if you think about the way the world works and the earth works, it's often the other way around in how important we are. Like if humans suddenly didn't exist tomorrow, then probably most of the other individuals on the earth would thrive. Whereas if you take the humble bumblebee away, we would, biodiversity would really struggle. So it's interesting, isn't it? And the kind of often the very microbes and insects that kind of we just consider not as important as we are actually the very things that are keeping the earth going.
I was thinking about this today, like so much of supremacy comes from a place of fear. We are scared because, we have this insecurity because maybe we don't contribute to the global ecosystem in a way that bees do or flies do. And so I think it makes a lot of sense, really, actually, that humans are so supremacist and so attached to supremacy because we feel terrified by our own insignificantness and small place in the world, even if that insignificant small place in the world is a beautiful one. It's not good enough. We need the power to feel more secure, but I mean it doesn't actually work.
This raises a painful thing. When I was a sab, we killed a squirrel on the way to a sabbing once. It was kind of like, whoa, what's going on here, type of thing. And then from my own point of view, I remember suddenly becoming aware of what farms looked like. And so you had all these vegans in the sab van, and we were driving past thousands and thousands of other animal victims in pig units and broiler units and all that, in order to concentrate on the one fox. So it in the end kind of didn't compute, but I suppose that's a bit of a hierarchy as well.
Is it a hierarchy?
Carry on.
I'm so sorry. I was going to just ask, in that example that you gave, was that a hierarchy, or was it in terms of access? It's easier to access like saving one fox individual than it is to save or support or protect. Then it would have been to protect all of those chickens or pigs or other animals that you were driving past. I mean,
well, at the time, it was the time when direct action was pretty frequent and widespread in those days. And so it would have actually been cheaper to have rescued 50 chickens than probably organized a sab outing,
See.
in that sense. They're still talking about insects and insect supremacy and sentience. So it's 20 past, I think, folks. So
oh wow,
I know we've overrun again.
That's not like us at all, is it?
I don't think we've not overrun now. Probably since Jeremy left, probably.
Yeah, I know, we do always overrun. So Aiyana, it's been brilliant, really lovely to hear your perspectives and to hear about your project, which sounds incredible, and I'm really looking forward to your book. So, and would it be, because you said it might be in print, would you be doing any kind of audio version?
Yeah, we were just talking about this today with my mum, actually. Hopefully, yeah. We'll see.
Oh, that could be great. And also, while we were waiting for the book, there is a brilliant interview at Beyond Species podcast that people can listen to.
Yeah, it was from last year, wasn't it, Aiyana? And so, Beyond Species. Another thing that you mentioned in that podcast was the essay about the animalization of Black people. So
yes.
is that available anywhere? Because I had a quick search for it and I couldn't find it.
Yes, I am switching things up on my website at the moment, so it will be available soon. But if people want it, they can just DM me or message me or email me, and I'll
Well, do you want to give your address of your website so people can jot it down?
Yeah, it's just my name, AiyanaGoodfellow.com.
Ah, right, very good. .com.
Yes.
Splendid. Okay. Well, I have the end titles ready to roll. So, anybody got any devastatingly important last words?
Just to say that people are saying thank you in the comments to Aiyana and saying it was a really great discussion and very interesting and just seeing if I can super fascinating. So
super fascinating.
Thanks,
Not just
to
fascinating,
everyone. Yeah.
Super fascinating.
Super fascinating. I love that. Thank you to everyone in the comments as well. Thank you for coming along and watching the show. Thanks to Sticky Mothers for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
You little troopers.
Thanks,
and thanks
everybody.
mostly to Aiyana. Thank you.
Indeed. So, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Imagine.